Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we have Brother Ayman, and he will be discussing about advice for the Muslim youth. First question I have for you is, how do you think Muslim youth, or youth in general, should approach social pressures from the media?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad khatam ar-Rusul Nabiyyin. So your question is how to address pressure from social media, and I'm assuming by that you mean postings that other people do. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
I think we can, in general, speak about peer pressure. So some of the issues we see with youth, actually the most prevalent issue and most the strongest is identity. Having a clear identity of who am I and what's my purpose and why do I exist and how do I affiliate with others and how do I connect myself with other groups. So that is the root cause of the issue here. And if a young person can answer those questions, it becomes very easy for them to deflect negative peer pressure in general, whether it's through social media or direct peer pressure in person at school, for example, or in the community and so forth. But when it comes to social media, there are a few things that are also common. One is bullying. So people being sarcastic about other people, calling each other names, ignoring people's comments on a post, or responding in a negative way, things like that. So that's one type of social media pressure or distraction. The other type is influencing peers to do certain things. So for example, it could be to purchase, a product or to play a game or to watch a movie or whatever that might be. And sometimes it's positive things, sometimes it's negative. So again, it comes in many forms and shapes, but the best advice I can give a young person is understand your identity, understand who you are and your purpose in life. If you have a clear purpose of on life and what is it you want to do in your life? If you're 15 today, how do you see yourself when you're 18? Do you see yourself working part-time in the summer? Do you see yourself taking some programming classes? Do you see yourself attending meetings with public servants in the areas of advocacy? Do you see yourself attending seminars and educational workshops? What is the vision you have for yourself? And for any human being, having a vision gives us confidence, gives us clarity of purpose and why we exist, and makes us ambitious to get up in the morning and do something meaningful. And then in that case, we wouldn't really care about what other people do or say about us in social media.
As you have said, many Muslim youth are facing an identity crisis. What advice would you give to youth?
So identity comes in many forms and shapes. There's racial identity. We see a lot of Muslim males questioning, are they African or Middle Eastern? Those who come from countries like Egypt and Sudan and Somalia, but mainly North Africa, that they ask themselves in their heads, am I a Black American or a North African American? So that's one example. Another example is, am I a Muslim American or an American Muslim? Am I, so that's, again, race and national origin is an example of an identity crisis that many young people go through. And for adults like myself, sometimes we forget about these things, or we're not even oblivious to it or even aware. I know for myself, I grew up in this country and then I went back to my parents' origin. And then over there, I had that identity crisis. Am I American or Egyptian? Which country do I belong to? Which nationality? So that you can And, over the years, I forgot about it and, dealt with it and so forth. But a lot of young people have that identity crisis, that national origin, especially if they're first generation Americans that were born here, or if they might immigrated to this country when they were relatively, in their teen years, young, 12, 14, 15. That causes a little bit of confusion, especially if they don't have meaningful discussions with their parents. And again, they don't have a clear purpose of life. And it gets compounded when parents talk about going back home, wherever home is, right? And we know that that's not realistic. Most immigrants who come to this country end up staying here and living here and dying here. The vast majority, I mean, 90 some percent. There are a few cases where they decide to go back to their home countries when they retire or at some point in their life. But the vast majority staying here. But when their children always hear that they're there's this intention to go back. There's this connection that is stronger than the connection with the local area, just because that's how human nature is. That confuses young people a little bit. So the first thing is, that's a type of identity crisis, and the advice I give here people is, don't let go of your origin. If your origin is Russia or Algeria or Kenya or whatever origin you come from, it's important to hold on to it and understand your heritage, understand your family history, understand the history of the country where your parents came from. That's part of your identity. It doesn't mean that you don't have also another identity, which is your American identity, being born in this country and living here. And it's important for that you hold on to both. And there's no conflict in having two origins or two cultures that you can relate to. You can reconcile that. I mean, it is okay. What happens is some of the young people, they shun away from their parents' national origin, either because of the fear of being ridiculed. It might be a country that is not favorably talked about in the media. It's labeled in a certain way in the media, or it's a company that's going through struggles and problems and war and poverty and things like that. So, the young person might have an inclination to distance herself or himself from that national origin. But understanding that you are not to be blamed for these potential negative impressions, and that is something you need to be proud of. Every part of the planet has something special, and the Prophet ﷺ, again in his beautiful life and his sunnah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows us how he originated from Mecca. That's where he was born, and that's where his tribe was from, and his parents. And he came from a very honorable tribe, the tribe of Quraysh, that was well respected by other tribes and so forth. But he left that and migrated to Medina in his adult years, and he settled there. He became a person of an identity of Medina. He established a town. He established a masjid. He established a community. He established a country and a capital of a nation in that place. And he still would connect and relate to Mecca as his national origin. And he would say, if it wasn't for my people who kicked me out, I would have always, stayed here. So it's okay to have, that relationship with two places and connect with two places. So that's important. As a matter of fact, it's healthy. If someone has a national origin that they know where they came from, it's really healthy to learn it, to study it, to understand the language, the culture, and have that advantage of knowing two cultures and understanding two cultures. So that's one common identity. We find young people who tried to hide where they came from, or they tried to distance themselves from their parents because their parents speak broken English, or they weren't raised here, they don't understand or have experienced everything in the culture. Another common identity crisis we see is faith. Um, my parents are religious people. They pray 5 times a day. They don't eat pork. They don't drink. They're different from the majority of people in this society. There are people in this society who don't drink, they don't eat pork, and they're not Muslim. They follow other faiths. Uh, but again, it's being short-sighted, focusing too much on how different my parents are from the rest of society when it comes to faith. And because my friends at school don't understand that headscarf on my mom's head, or why I take Eid off, or why we don't eat during Ramadan, or these kind of things, instead of again having confidence in oneself to explain to people these great values and these great rituals and activities, uh, the young person tends to hide it. And when you have something that's part of your identity and you hide it, that causes pain, causes psychological pain to the person. And in some cases, it could cause issues with the personality and so forth. So that's another type of identity crisis. And what ends up happening, either the young person shuns away completely from the faith of their parents and becomes agnostic, or atheist, or something else. But usually in the Muslim population, the young people become agnostic. In other faiths, we see the same problem. In Christianity, the youth would leave the practice of their parents, and they might follow a different religion, Hinduism, for example. So we see that happening across different populations. It's not something unique to the Muslim population, but Muslims tend to become agnostic because they can't find anything out there that makes sense to them. It's there are a few people here and there that leave Islam and go to other faiths, but the majority, they become agnostic because they know they've read about these other faiths and it doesn't compare to Islam at all. It's much weaker, missing a lot of things, has contradictions, and doesn't make sense to them. So they just end up being agnostic because it helps their conscience not feel guilty that they're not doing certain things that they feel they should be doing, because they see their parents doing it and they understand there's wisdom behind it, but they just can't reconcile with the society. So that's a second type of identity crisis, which is related to faith. There are a few other types that have been popping up recently. The identity of who am I from a professional perspective. So we see that identity of I need to be a hustler. I need to be on the streets, hustling with people, selling drugs, doing tough stuff, illegal stuff, because it's cool and it makes me strong. So we see that a bit. The person might not have any struggles or issues with their racial, national origin, their faith, but they have a professional identity crisis. They just can't see themselves as a computer programming, or a programmer, or an accountant, or a plumber, or whatever legal profession is out there. They see themselves more as the hustler and the guy who's running from the cops and being adventurous and so forth. We're seeing also in the recent years of the last decade an increase in sexual identity crisis. Brothers who feel that they need to transform to a sister, or vice versa. Sisters who feel that they're tough, they're rough, and they should be brothers. They shouldn't be girls. That's increasingly happening, and we don't have official statistics, but rough order of magnitude surveys show us there's about 3 to 5 cases at a given time in a local metropolitan jurisdiction. So if you take a county in the Metro DC area or Baltimore area, a populous county like Howard, Montgomery, PG, we can expect there's 5 Muslim kids at a given time who are going through this type of identity. And it could be because of impact of media. It could be how things are sexualized in our society, whether it's consumer goods or entertainment, or different types of things going around. There are many, obviously, there's a big push for equity for LGBT, so that trickles down to schools, and teachers talk about these kind of things, and students study it sometimes even in their social sciences classes or social studies classes. So this all has an impact and an effect on the young person's mind, and they can get confused. So obviously in Islam we have a clear picture of what identity means, right? And to answer your first question, what advice would I give a young person who has any identity crisis, right? Some people have a crisis with identity when it comes to living. Should I even live? This life is not worth it, or I'm not worth living, so I'm going to end my life. So these are all crises that young people go through uh, related to their identity, manifested in different perspectives. And the advice I give everyone is we have the best identity that any human being can have, which is to identify ourselves in relationship to our Creator, right? If we can understand this identity relationship, we would be at peace with ourselves, because really everything else is trivial. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, He doesn't look at your skin color, at your national origin, your parents. He doesn't look at any of this stuff. He doesn't, on the day of judgment, He's not going to tell someone, why are you a boy or a girl? No, He's going to look at our hearts. He's going to say, why did you do good deeds? Why did you do bad deeds? Right? I gave you some advice and guidance. I said, don't do this, don't do that, but do this, do that. And you followed or you didn't follow. And that's what we'll be questioned about. So if we can keep that in mind, that the most important identity, if the whole world bullies me, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with me, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the whole world does. But if the whole world praises me and makes me a statue and in a high position in society, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is displeased with me, it doesn't matter. I mean, all this praise and all this honor is worthless. Right. So I think the best advice I can give anyone is understand your purpose in life. Because if you understand your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you'll understand your purpose in life automatically. So to understand our identity, we need to understand our relationship with the one who created us, because He created us and He gave us that identity. As He says in the Quran, وَسَمَّاكُمْ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. He called you the submitters. That's one way He identified us in the Quran. He's identified some of us as believers, oh, you who believe. He's identified the whole humanity as, oh, you people, the sons of Adam and Eve. So there are multiple ways we've been identified by our Creator, right, in the Quran and in other books, as the Christians say, we're the children of God, right? It's not really the children of God, it's the servants of God, it's the slaves of God. So, you look at the scriptures, the Quran and the earlier scriptures, the divine scriptures, you'll see that human beings have been identified by their relationship to the one who created them. And that's the best identity anyone can have. And if we truly understand that, we will be at peace and we won't have any struggles or concerns.
What do you believe is the biggest issue concerning the youth today socially?
The biggest issue, again, is identity. We talked about that quite a bit, but there are other issues as well. There are the issues of being distracted and lack of focus, the inability to have a clear picture of what do I want to do in my life. There's a lot of bright young people who get up every morning and they don't have a plan for their day. They just get up, at whatever time, 10, 11, 12, 2 in the afternoon. They go grab a bite, say hi to a few people at home, get on a video game, play for a bit, check their phones, text some people, check social media. And before you know it, it's like 6 in the evening, right? And if there was no COVID, they go out, they see their friends, or they hop in front on a video game, TV, whatnot. I mean, that's what some people do, not everyone, of course. But there's no clear objective for the day. It's not like, okay, tomorrow I'm going fishing, and after that I'll do practice, and then after that I will study a little bit or read something. So this lack of focus is very destructive, because again, you don't have a purpose. You don't have something exciting for you to get up in the morning. And, we see a drastic um, differential between in performance between youth who have a purpose that they get up every morning for and youth who don't. An example is in our internship program here at ILIA, Islamic Leadership Institute. The youth who intern with us, every morning they're on a phone call at 7 in the morning, 7:15 for half an hour, talking about what they've accomplished, what they're doing the same day, their issues, their challenges, they connect. And many of them have created friendships. They didn't know each other before this internship, but they've become friends because they have now a common purpose. They have something, they have success stories together. They work on a project together and it succeeds, and they see the output of that project. And it gives them that sense of accomplishment and motivation and excitement, and they move on to the next thing. Now, contrast that with someone who doesn't have such a social circle, who does not have such a social circle that's meaningful, not just a bunch of young people getting together talking about random things, but a bunch of young people coming together talking about real life experiences, real life challenges that they're providing real life solutions for. So when you're part of an organization, especially a youth run organization where the president is a young person, the person running the timesheets is a young person, the person running the meetings is a young person. Every role in the organization is someone of your age. It feels like you're out, hanging out with friends, but rather than just killing time, running across town in a car or sitting, idle somewhere talking about random things, you're actually doing productive stuff. And human beings need that sense of self-appreciation, that we feel good about ourselves. And when people don't feel good about themselves, they start to get depressed. They start to have quote unquote what we call today mental issues, right? Why do these issues exist today and they weren't so prevalent 200 years ago? Because 200 years ago, young people get up early in the morning, go out to the farm with their parents and take care of the cattle or the sheep and harvest some crops, and they were working, at the age of 8 and 10 and 12. So there was a very positive side of that, and young people need to stay busy, need to be productive. So I would say after identity, the biggest challenge or facing young people is to keep themselves busy with meaningful stuff, right? Not trivial work, meaningful things that kind of gives them that sense of satisfaction where they can actually contribute to the society they live in and have a lasting impression.
Many teens have been negatively affected by social media. Do you believe that parents should become overprotective?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the age of the child. At a certain age, and social media is not appropriate for children, and that's why even the social media administrators or governance policies require that people be over a certain age, 13 or 16 or 18, depending on the platform. So, definitely you should not have an 8-year-old with a social media account because they're not ready for it. They still have not developed a reasonable level of social skills, right? How to communicate to strangers, how to identify potential issues, what to share, what not to share, how to share, things like that. But once they progress in their lives and they reach more maturity at certain ages, it is appropriate to give them access to social media. So I'm not an advocate of being a helicopter parent over your child and checking where they're going and what they're doing, especially if they're older in high school or college. And unfortunately, I've heard of youth in college, where their parents are helicopters on top of them. They don't even let them drive. That's very unfortunate, because when you look at the youth of the time of the Prophet ﷺ, right? They had horses. These young Sahabi, they had their own horses, just like having your car, and they would take their horse and travel. Not only that, but they would be leaders and appointed tasks. The Prophet ﷺ would send a 17-year-old or a 16-year-old to Medina to explain to people Quran before the hijrah, before the migration. He would send a 14-year-old to Yemen to teach people about Islam. So not only did that young person ride a horse or a camel, but he took other folks possibly with him, and he led them in that journey or mission. And he was, the ambassador, the representation of the entire Muslim community. I mean, think about that, right? So, and that is a social interaction. You're sending a 14-year-old to talk to a bunch of strangers in a different culture, possibly a different dialect or language altogether, a different faith system and belief system, and complete difference of philosophy. People worshiping the sun or the fire, and not comprehending that there's a divine Lord that we can't touch and see. So very different concepts and philosophies, but yet these people were prepared and were sent on these missions. So I feel that to be a helicopter parent over your 16-year-old who's using Instagram is completely against the nature of the development of a young person. On the flip side, I should have prepared that 16-year-old when they were 14 and 13 and 12 how to use that social media platform, be it Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, whatever it is. So I think social media can have a very positive aspect in a person's life. And it could have also a negative aspect if the person's not trained, is not prepared. And that's where, to your point, the parent's engagement has to happen early in the childhood years. Just like you teach a child how to eat and talk, you need to teach a child how to use computers and social media, when they turn 7, 8, 9. By the age of 11, your teenager or preteen should be ready to use the internet on their own. They should be able, just like to walk in the street on their own, to be able to figure out, should I cross the street now or not? Or there's a car coming, I should wait. Same thing, they should be able to get on the internet and answer questions for themselves. Should I go to this website or not? Should I talk to this person yet or not? Or should I wait till I'm maybe a little older and I know how to talk to strangers? So I think it depends on the age and the maturity of the person. There are some very rare exceptions where we might need to control social media from certain people. But again, that's very rare, and usually it's because they were not trained at an earlier age. And at the end of the day, I think parents need to assess the harms of taking something away or controlling it versus letting it go. If there are two harms that could potentially happen, if my teenage girl will run away from the home because I took Instagram away from her because she thinks or feels that the parent is too abusive, I might want to let her use that internet so she can stay with us at home, because if she's out on the street, that's definitely a bigger harm than being loose on the internet. So I think parents need to be smart as well and understand their children and understand how to choose between the less of two evils, as they say.
This is our last question. What advice would you give parents when having to deal with their kids on social media?
What advice would I give parents for their kids how to use social media?
Yes.
I think we kind of talked a little bit about that. So one is connect only with people you know, right? So just like when you walk in the street, you don't talk to random strangers, you talk to people you know in your neighborhood. So if you're walking on your sidewalk and you see your neighbor, Mr. Smith, good morning, Mr. Smith, or Brother Ahmed, Salaam alaikum. And the further you get away from your home, if you're not in a neighborhood anymore, you're in a public area, shopping center, you're just not going to talk to random people. So similarly, you would want to talk to your schoolmates, your friends at school, maybe your friend's friend, but it kind of stops at that, because your friend's friend is like your 50th neighbor, that neighbor in the neighborhood. So it's still, you see your neighbor in front of their house, you know that they're a distant neighbor, but you don't necessarily know them, but you'll still say hi to them, right? So I think by analogy, similarly, my advice is talk to people you know, and possibly there are direct connections, but more than that, you don't want to necessarily connect with someone you don't know. Another rule is connect with people your age, a year older, a year younger, your age, but not, someone who's 10 years older than you. If you're in ninth grade in high school, you don't want to be talking to a third-year college person unless you're in the community together, you're working on something together at school or the masjid or the community. But if it's just a random person, a friend of a friend who is 5 years older than you, um, that's not a normal relationship, especially in that age range. There's a big difference in the intellectual capability of people, the maturity levels, and so forth. And we've seen a lot of problems happen from these types of relationships. People who are over 21 have certain privileges in society where people under 18 don't. And if the young person connects with the wrong person in a different age group, they can actually harm them much more than their own peers. So that's another thing, is to connect with people of your age, connect with people that share your interests. So if you are into science and engineering at school, join a group on Instagram or Facebook that talks about these types of things. Don't just join any random group. So the advice for parents and for young people, because again, I mean, we're talking about folks who can make decisions for themselves at this point in their lives, high school kids, look for opportunities of development on the internet. If you're on a social media platform, a lot of businesses now use Instagram, and Twitter has been a strong platform for businesses for years. More than even youth. There's a lot of good content out there. There's a lot of good groups that you can join. You can actually do good projects and build relationships with professionals and adults in your community, people that you can trust, right? So this is the exception where you can connect with someone outside of your age range for professional, context. So you see brother so-and-so, he's the doctor that I know in the community. I see him at Isha, and I see on his page or his post that he's working on some exciting project related to COVID. I can connect with that person and say, hey, brother so and so, can I come to your office one day and spend 2 hours and see what you guys do? And a lot of professionals and adults actually welcome that from young people. So these are opportunities that young people can explore on the internet. You can try to look for business opportunities to sell things. You can start your own online store or shop, e-commerce, things like that, and have success stories, inshallah, on the internet.
This is all I have for you today. Jazakumullahu khairan for attending this interview.
Thank
Assalamu alaikum
you.
wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.